Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1997 comedy Meet Wally Sparks. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I want to give a special shout out to Brock for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to my PayPal. The link will be in the video description down below, and I'll try to get to it as soon as I possibly can. Now, Meet Wally Sparks is one of those comedies that I definitely would define as run of the mill. It's a very mediocre, so-so comedy. I've seen worse, but I've also seen a lot better. And that's honestly too bad considering the fact that it stars and showcases legendary comedian Rodney Dangerfield. And I will say this, compared to a lot of the other films that he did after this, during the twilight of his career, this is definitely a lot more watchable and a lot more entertaining than some of those other films that he did that were just really cheap and just total cringe fests. And you just felt bad for Rodney Dangerfield. Here, you don't necessarily feel bad for him when it comes to his performance in this movie, because he's definitely one of the highlights. He's definitely one of the best things about it. He's one of the main reasons why it's as tolerable as it is. Now, the film is directed by a television veteran in Peter Baldwin, who directed countless episodes of numerous television series over the years. Brady Bunch, even Stevens, like the list goes on and on and on and on. The man directed episodes of pretty much every sitcom or TV show you can think of. I mean, he directed episodes of Full House. And this was honestly, I think, his only feature film, or one of his only feature films, because he didn't do a lot of feature film projects. He was mostly relegated to television. I think his experience and his connections in the TV world definitely led to a lot of these television stars having cameos in this movie. I was really shocked by how many celebrity cameos there were in this film, especially considering it's a relatively low budget movie from Trimark Pictures and a company, called Largo Entertainment. But even though it has all these cameos, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a classic or even necessarily as good as some of the television episodes featuring some of these actors or actresses. The direction, though, by Peter Baldwin, for a guy who didn't really do a lot of films, it's there. It's not what I would call that impressive or that incredible. I would say the strongest it is during like the opening credits, where I think it really did capture the manic, frenzious energy of a controversial daytime or afternoon talk show in the vein of Jerry Springer. I think the way that those scenes were shot definitely did capture that vibe well, but I don't feel that vibe was necessarily captured quite to the same level in other scenes throughout the movie, especially when it comes to some of the attempts to try to pull off some slapstick. It just came across as forced, didn't really feel natural from a directing standpoint, and there were times where the direction really did feel very flat, very one note, and really did make it look like it was a pilot for a TV show, which, if it was intended to be that, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but if it's a feature film. So when you have a feature film that looks and feels like a television pilot, then the film is at a bit of a disadvantage. And I think Peter Baldwin, despite his connections in the industry, I think this film probably would have been better if you had a director who was more experienced when it comes to directing feature films. Not a guy who directed maybe a few TV movies, or a guy who directed a lot of episodes of television shows. But then again, it might be one of those things where Trimark and other people involved with the movie just didn't really have a lot of options available for a director. But at the same time, maybe they could have taken a risk and hired someone like straight out of film school or something, like someone who just not necessarily was a long-time veteran, but someone who had some skills, showed some potential to showcase comedy or so on. I mean, the film cost $12 million, so it's not like it was a movie that was super low budget compared to other direct-to-video comedies. So I feel that it honestly was held back from reaching its full potential because of the director that they chose for the project. He did an okay job, but that was really his limit. And I think if you had somebody who could really bring even more energy and even more creativity to the table when it comes to the camera work and the shot selection, I think that definitely would have helped this movie be more memorable and definitely stand out more, because it just really it really did felt like an extended episode of some kind of sitcom, or it really just could not differentiate itself visually from any other direct-to-video or low-budget comedy from around that time period. The screenplay by Harry Basil and Rodney Dangerfield, there are some elements of this script that work, like the attempts to parody daytime television. I think that actually was pretty solid, had some decent bits of satire. I think the dynamic between certain characters, like Wally and his assistant Sandy, or Wally and this young fan of his, Robbie, played by, I think it was Glenn Walker Harris. So you have like a fun little dynamic between those two. So you have Wally, who's this uncouth, controversial talk show figure that is butting heads with Robbie's dad, the Governor Floyd Preston. And I thought that Wally and Robbie had some fun scenes together. But I don't think the antagonistic back and forth between Wally and the governor was really as strong as it could have been. It felt a little too one-sided. Like the governor didn't really get a lot of his own shots in. He just got run over by Rodney Dangerfield's character, Wally Sparks. So it just made that character really come across like a total pushover. So he didn't really have a moment where he just put his foot down or stood up for himself. He was just a pushover for the majority of the movie. And even if there were some moments that I can't recall off the top of my head where he did manage to stand up for himself or throw some witty barbs back at Wally Sparks, none of them really had that much spark to them. I mean, they just weren't really anything that stuck with you. They were static in the wrong way. And there's this whole stuff going on with a love story with Emily Preston, who is the daughter of the governor, who's falling in love with Wally's son, Dean. I didn't think that worked either. It was very Hallmark, Lifetime movie kind of stuff. It was nothing that special. Also, the humor in this script is very hit and miss. There are some nice bits of satire. There are some fun lines of dialogue or one-liners or insults from Rodney Dangerfield. But then there's other stuff where it's just lazy. It's very lazy in terms of the comedy or the jokes. Goes with sex jokes or gross out gags, or really relies too heavily upon comedic cliches. And there's this whole bit with this guy who works for Wally's boss, Mr. Spencer, and this character, I believe, I'm trying to remember who it is, who this character is, because I really want to find out for sure who this character was, because I did not. Okay, it's not Mark L. Taylor, who was in a bunch of other stuff. I think it's Iman Roche. Yeah, I think that's who it is. It's Iman Roche, who plays Alan Miller, who's this guy who works for Mr. Spencer, and he's trying to expose Wally Sparks. And this performance was just very cartoonish, felt out of place. He really felt like he belonged in a Home Alone movie, and that whole vibe just didn't really mix with this film. It just didn't feel right with this movie. Also, the main plot line of Wally Sparks going to the governor's mansion, getting involved in the party, and having things go haywire, and then him staying at the mansion and doing a show at the mansion in order to boost the ratings, and have this whole thing where he's lying about how severe the injury is that he sustained at the party, and of course leading to the reveal that he's lying. All that stuff is just incredibly generic and bland, and so is the stuff involving Wally Sparks and this culture shock, where he's bringing his brand of humor, his brand of fun to these hoity-toity rich people, the governor's mansion, and it's the typical kind of stuff that you've seen a million times, where a stuffy housewife gets a taste of the wild side and is a little crazy, and it's that kind of stuff. And it's just one of those things where I think at this point in 1997, this was such an old hat that it just wasn't funny. Like, when you've told a joke so many times, it does get to the point where it's no longer funny. And I think that sort of thing, it just really reared its ugly head. And when it comes to this script, where it really relied a lot upon these old cliches, these old comedy cliches for a lot of these plot points and subplots. And even the whole stuff with Wally Sparks going up against the rich, and him providing his bit of his honesty, you know, and his particular type of comedy that's very different compared to these rich elites. That's done better in Caddyshack. So it just feels like sloppy seconds at times, even when it comes to this stuff. But there's still a certain endearing quality to Wally Sparks, despite how much of a legitimately lame character he can be in terms of his morals and his demeanor and stuff like that. But he still seems to have enough of a heart, though, and enough of a drive to make this character still likable enough. But I don't know if that's necessarily due to the script, and really, honestly, more due to Rodney Dangerfield and his own charisma. Now, you have all these cameos by all these different celebrities, and a lot of it is just very superficial. And it's just one of those things where it's like, oh, hey, there's Roseanne, and there's Tim Allen, and there's so-and-so. And it's fun, but they're very short cameos, so it's not like a lot of these talk show hosts or these celebrities really had a significant amount of screen time in the film. But yeah, the script, it's there. It's not the worst thing out there, but it definitely is one of those scripts that is pretty lazy, relies way too much upon the cliches of the genre, and doesn't really take as many risks as you think it might, considering that this is a film dealing with some type of controversial talk show host in the vein of like Morton Downey Jr. or something. Now, the film also features some alright technical elements, like the cinematography by Richard H. Klein, the editing by Raul Davalos. The score by Michel Colombier, though, is really nothing to make any notes of. Like, it's a very forgettable score. And what's crazy, this is the same guy who did the score for The Golden Child, which is a really good score. Very catchy score. He also did music for Cop with James Woods. He did music for Deep Cover, Major League 2. He did work on Purple Rain. He worked on the score for The Money Pit. I always felt that was a pretty decent score. But this was around the time where he was doing a lot of, honestly, pretty lame projects, pretty bad films. Like, prior to this, he did Barbed Wire, for instance. So I'm not going to blame the guy for just taking whatever job he can get, but at the same time, I know that this composer can do better than this. And it was pretty sad to hear his sad excuse of a score for this movie, because it really was something that you've heard a million times and a million other comedies. There was nothing about it that differentiated it itself from a slew of other scores. The cast, it's an interesting mix of different actors. I mean, you have Rodney Dangerfield, who plays Wally Sparks, and he's definitely the one that provides the most star power, and he really does make the film watchable. It's a time waster for me, mainly due to Rodney Dangerfield and his strengths as a performer. Debi Mazar, she was also fun as Sandy, Wally's spitfire of a secretary or companion. Cindy Williams, she was there as Emily Preston, the stuck-up housewife who then lets loose when she gets to know Wally Sparks and learns how to party. Alan Rations, he plays this judge named Judge Randall Williams. The judge really isn't in the film that much. Michael Weatherly, who you might recognize as DiNozzo in NCIS, he's in this in a completely unrecognizable role as Dean Sparks, Wally's rock and roll son, who's the lead singer of some rock and roll band. I did not even recognize that actor at all. I when I looked that up, I had to double check, because I was like, really? That's DiNozzo? It is. It's DiNozzo. Lisa Thornhill is in this as an actress named, she's a wannabe actress named Priscilla Preston. Marco Taylor plays this guy, Harvey Bishop. Marco Taylor's been in a lot of stuff. He was in Inner Space. He was in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. He was in Arachnophobia as the guy who's with Julian Sands in the beginning of the movie, who gets bit by the big spider and dies. He's in this as a confidant, so to speak, a right-hand man to the governor, Floyd Preston, who's played by David Ogden Stiers, who was there in this role. I don't blame him a whole lot, because I don't think the script really gave his character as much to do as I feel it should have. I definitely didn't do a good job making him a likable character or a likable crudmudgeon. For instance, compare his politician character to someone like Gene Hackman's role in The Birdcage. Like, his character was irascible. His character was not really necessarily the most likable guy at the start. He was very stubborn, and he was kind of a dick. But then as the film went on, you got to know him a little bit more. He let down his guard, and he became endearing in his own way, to the point where he's dressed in drag and doing a line dance to "We Are Family" to to sneak away from the cops at the end of the movie, and it's a blast. It's fun because that character, the way it was written, it had an arc where that character could build up to something where you would see the character as more than just a foil for the leads. And I never really felt that way about David Ogden Stiers' character, Governor Preston. And that's really mainly due to the script. It's not necessarily due to Stiers. He did the best that he could with what he had to work with. Burt Reynolds, it's kind of fun to see him as a angry, bitter television boss, executive, and you could you could honestly tell that Burt was having fun with this role. I honestly wish he was in it more because Burt was definitely injecting some energy into the film with his performance. Robbie, played by Glenn Walker Harris, for a preteen actor, he was fine. He was decent enough. I liked the chemistry that he had with Rodney Dangerfield. You also have like Priscilla Preston. Sorry, Priscilla Preston. Yeah, Priscilla Preston. I'm gonna go back to that character that Lisa Thornhill played, because Priscilla Preston was actually the younger, what, not the younger. She was the daughter of the governor, who had a romantic relationship with Wally's son, and I want to go back to her because she was there as well. Same thing goes with Michael Weatherly. I didn't necessarily buy their love story though, but it's not necessarily those two actors' fault. You also had Cindy Ambull. She's the one that plays Lola LaRue, the one that tries to screw over Wally Sparks, and then they find a way to screw her back and get his show back by the end of the movie. But yeah, Amon Roche as Alan, I didn't care for that character or that performance. It was way too forced. It was the kind of thing where he's trying to be wacky, and it just came across as pretty painful to watch. But other than the main cast, you got other cameos by a ton of different celebrities. You got Tony Danza, who plays a taxi driver who just picks up Wally Sparks and takes him to the airport, I believe. Leslie Ann Down, who plays a hooker nurse. Karen Duffy's in it as a reporter. Gilbert Godfrey plays some guy who's a guest on a talk show named Mr. Harry Carp. Ron Jeremy's in this as a porn actor. I mean, what else? Sir Mix-a-Lot of, I like big butts and I cannot lie. That guy, he's in this as an announcer for the Wally Sparks show. Bob Saget has a tiny bit role as a reporter. Julia Sweeney plays Martha Carp. George Wallace plays a bartender. You've got Martin Downey Jr., who's in it as himself. George Hamilton, Jay Leno, Sally Jesse Raphael, Geraldo Rivera, Jerry Springer, Tim Allen, Roseanne, Michael Bolton, who's like friends with Wally Sparks and sings at the governor's party. So yeah, it's one of those movies where it's kind of a fun one-time watch just to play Spot a Celebrity. But it doesn't mean that the celebrity cameos are really anything more than just that, because the script doesn't really do a lot with all that star power. And the star power did nothing for this movie when it comes to the box office. It was a bomb. It only made like $4 million on a $12 million budget, and I think it got a decent release from Trimark, but it just didn't do well. Critics were not happy with it at all, and I could kind of see why, but at the same time, after watching it, I don't think it's as bad as some of these critics make it out to be. Like, I've seen comedies that are a million times worse than Meet Wally Sparks. But anyway, I don't really know what else to say about this movie except thanks for watching my review. And as always, I'll see you later. See ya.